The autumn leaves crunched beneath Maya Rodriguez's worn boots as she made her way across the school parking lot, her backpack heavy with textbooks and the weight of another difficult day. At 17, she had learned to keep her head down and move quickly, but today felt different. Today, the usual whispers seemed louder, the stares more pointed, and the knot in her stomach tighter than ever. Maya had always been different from her classmates at Millbrook High. While they lived in suburban neighborhoods with manicured lawns and two-car garages, she called a working farm home. 200 acres of rolling hills, vegetable gardens, and livestock that required tending before dawn and after dusk. Her calloused hands told stories of early mornings milking cows and afternoons mending fences, while her classmates' hands knew only the smooth surface of smartphone screens and gaming controllers. Her father, Captain Diego Rodriguez, was a forest ranger who had served his community for over 15 years. After her mother died when Maya was 12, it had been just the two of them against the world. Diego had taught his daughter everything he knew about survival, respect for nature, and standing up for what's right. But he couldn't teach her how to navigate the cruel social hierarchy of high school, where being different made you a target. The bullying had started small. Snide comments about her secondhand clothes, jokes about the smell of hay that sometimes lingered in her hair, whispered remarks about her being the farm freak. But as senior year progressed, it had escalated. Madison Pierce, the school's self-appointed queen bee whose father owned half the businesses in town, had made Maya her personal project. Madison's crew of followers, Brittany, Chelsea, and Amber, hung on her every word like disciples, ready to do her bidding without question. Today had been particularly brutal. During chemistry class, Madison had accidentally knocked over her experiment, ruining weeks of careful work on her senior project. In the hallway, someone had taped a sign to Maya's locker that read, "Barn Animals Sanctuary," with crude drawings of farm animals. At lunch, when Maya sat alone as usual, the girls at the neighboring table had made loud comments about people who belonged in barns instead of classrooms. Maya had endured it all with the stoic determination her father had instilled in her. "Mija," he would say, "trees bend in the storm, but they don't break. Be like the oak, strong roots, flexible branches." So she bent, but she refused to break, even when every fiber of her being wanted to fight back. As she approached the edge of the school grounds, Maya noticed Madison and her crew lingering near the tree line that separated the campus from the dense forest beyond. They were clearly waiting for something or someone. Maya's instincts, honed by years of helping her father track wildlife and assess dangerous situations, told her to turn around and find another route home. But the direct path through the woods was the fastest way to the farm, and she had chores waiting. Madison spotted her first. "Well, look who's heading back to her natural habitat," she called out, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. The other girls giggled and positioned themselves to block Maya's path. Maya kept walking, hoping to push past them without incident. But Madison stepped directly into her way, flanked by her friends in a formation that looked almost military in its precision. "Where do you think you're going, farm girl?" "Home," she replied simply, trying to keep her voice steady. She could feel her heart rate increasing, the way it did when she encountered a dangerous animal in the wild. Her father had taught her to read body language, to identify threats before they fully materialized. Everything about this situation screamed danger. "My dad says your kind brings down property values," Amber added, emboldened by the group dynamic. "Maybe if you transferred to agricultural school where you belong, our neighborhood would be better off." Maya found herself pressed against the rough bark of a large oak tree, the same kind her father had taught her to respect and draw strength from. The irony wasn't lost on her. As the four girls loomed closer, their faces twisted with a mixture of cruelty and excitement, Maya closed her eyes briefly and tried to channel her father's teachings about staying calm under pressure. But this was unlike any situation Diego had prepared her for. This wasn't a wild animal acting on instinct. This was calculated human cruelty, and Maya had never felt more alone or vulnerable in her life.
"You think you're so special, don't you?" Madison's voice cut through the forest air like a blade. "With your perfect grades and your little teacher's pet routine. But we all know the truth. You're nothing but a charity case who doesn't belong here." Maya pressed her back against the oak tree, feeling the rough bark through her thin jacket. Her father had taught her about fight or flight responses in animals, but he'd also taught her about a third option that most people forgot: freeze. Sometimes, staying perfectly still was the best survival strategy. But as she looked into Madison's eyes, she saw something that made her blood run cold. This wasn't just about social hierarchies or teenage drama anymore. This was personal, and it was dangerous. "You know what really bothers me?" Madison continued, stepping so close that Maya could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the scent of superiority. "My father's been trying to buy your little farm for months. Says it would be perfect for his new shopping complex. But your stubborn dad keeps refusing to sell." The pieces suddenly clicked into place for Maya. This wasn't random bullying. This was targeted harassment designed to make her family's life so miserable they would have no choice but to leave. Madison's father, Thomas Pierce, was one of the most ruthless developers in the state, known for buying up rural properties and turning them into strip malls and subdivisions. Maya had heard her father on phone calls late at night, his voice tight with stress, as he dealt with what he called pressure tactics from Pierce Development Group. "So here's what's going to happen," Madison said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow sounded more threatening than shouting. "You're going to go home tonight and convince your dad to sell the farm. Tell him accidents happen to people who don't know when they're not wanted." "That's not happening," Maya said quietly, finding her voice despite the fear coursing through her veins. "My family's not going anywhere." Madison's mask of fake sweetness dropped completely, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "Wrong answer." She nodded to her friends, who moved closer. "Girls, I think Maya needs some convincing." Brittany reached into her designer purse and pulled out her phone. "Should we record this? I bet everyone at school would love to see the farm freak get what she deserves." "Good idea," Chelsea said, moving to block any potential escape route back toward the school. "We can call it Teaching Farm Animals Their Place." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized how isolated they were. The forest stretched for miles in every direction, and the school was far enough away that even screaming wouldn't bring help. She thought her father, probably out on patrol somewhere in these very woods, completely unaware that her daughter was in danger. He had taught her to use the forest whistle, a specific pattern of sharp calls that rangers use to communicate. But would he be close enough to hear? "You know what really bothers me?" Amber said, circling her like a predator. "Why do you even bother coming to school with us? Wouldn't you be happier with your own kind? Maybe at one of those schools for special needs kids?" "Because she thinks she's better than us," Madison answered for Maya. "Don't you, farm girl? You think because you get good grades and the teachers like you that you somehow deserve to be here? But here's the thing. This is our world, and you're just visiting." Maya tried to calculate her options. She was outnumbered 4-1, and while her father had taught her some basic self-defense, she had never been in a real fight. The girls were blocking her most obvious escape routes, but the forest was her second home. If she could just get deeper into the woods, she might be able to lose them and find help. "I'm going to count to 10, Madison said, pulling out her own phone and pointing it at Maya like a weapon. "By the time I get to 10, you're going to get on your knees and apologize for thinking you could fit in with decent people. Then you're going to promise to convince your dad to sell the farm and transfer to agricultural school where you belong." Maya's mind raced. Getting on her knees would be the ultimate humiliation, filmed and shared with the entire school by tomorrow morning. But more than that, it would be surrendering to everything these girls represented. The entitled cruelty that tried to crush anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. "1," Madison began, her voice sing-song with malicious glee. Maya shifted her weight, preparing to run. The forest whistle pattern echoed in her mind. 3 short bursts, 2 long ones, and then 3 short again. It was worth a try. 2. She pursed her lips and let out the first sequence of calls, hoping against hope that her father or one of his fellow rangers might be within hearing distance. "What was that?" Brittany asked, looking around nervously. "Did you guys hear that weird noise?" "Shut up," Madison snapped, not wanting to lose momentum. 3. Maya whistled again, louder this time, the sharp notes cutting through the forest air with the urgency of a distress signal. "She's trying to call for help," Chelsea realized, panic creeping into her voice. "Maybe we should—" 4, Madison continued, but Maya could see uncertainty flickering in her eyes for the first time. 5, Maya whistled the 3rd time, putting every ounce of breath and desperation she possessed into the call. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard an answering whistle, but it might have been wishful thinking, or just the wind through the trees. 6, Madison said, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. The answering whistle came again, clearer this time, and definitely not the wind. Maya's heart leaped as she recognized the response pattern. 2 long notes, followed by 3 short ones. The ranger acknowledgement signal her father had taught her years ago. Someone had heard her, and they were coming. Madison must have heard it too, because her countdown faltered. 7, she said, but she was looking around nervously now, her phone wavering as she tried to maintain her threatening pose while scanning the forest. "Madison, maybe we should go," Amber whispered, taking a step backward. "What if that's a teacher or something?" "Don't be stupid," Madison hissed, but Maya could see the doubt creeping into her expression. "It's probably just some hiker." 8. The forest around them was completely still, except for the sound of their breathing and the distant call of birds. Maya knew these woods better than anyone except her father and his ranger team. She knew that the unusual quiet meant that the wildlife sensed something. A disturbance, movement, possibly multiple people approaching through the underbrush. 9, Madison said, but she had lowered her phone, and Maya noticed that her hands were shaking slightly. That's when they heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy boots moving through the forest with purpose. Not the random crashing of lost hikers, but the coordinated movement of people who knew exactly where they were going and how to navigate silently through dense woodland. "Madison, we need to leave, now," Chelsea said, her voice tight with fear as the sounds grew closer. 10, Madison shouted, trying to regain control of the situation, but it was too late. The carefully orchestrated bullying session had spiraled beyond her ability to manage it. The first figure to emerge from the tree line was imposing even from a distance, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the olive-green uniform of the State Forest Service. Captain Diego Rodriguez stepped into the clearing with the quiet authority of someone who had spent 15 years protecting these woods and everything in them. His weathered face was calm, but Maya could see the dangerous glint in his dark eyes that appeared when he encountered poachers or anyone else who threatened what was under his protection. Behind him came 3 more rangers, moving in a coordinated formation that spoke of military training and years of working together as a team. Maya recognized them all.
Sergeant Maria Santos, Corporal Jake Morrison, and Ranger Tom Bradley. They were her father's closest colleagues, and she had grown up knowing them as honorary uncles who taught her to track deer and identify edible plants. But today they looked nothing like the friendly mentors she had remembered. Today they looked like what they really were: law enforcement officers trained in wilderness survival, hand-to-hand combat, and dealing with dangerous situations in remote locations. "Maya," Captain Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the calm authority that had commanded respect for over a decade. "Step away from the tree, mija." Maya didn't hesitate. She moved quickly to her father's side, feeling safer than she had all day as his protective presence enveloped her like armor. "Girls," Diego continued, his gaze moving deliberately across each of the 4 bullies. "I think there's been some confusion here. This is protected state forest land, and you're currently trespassing." We were just," Madison stammered, her earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. The phone in her hand had stopped recording, and she seemed to have forgotten it existed. "You were just what?" Sergeant Santos asked, stepping forward. Maria Santos was small in stature, but had a reputation for taking down poachers twice her size. Her voice carried the kind of quiet menace that made smart people very nervous. "And what I saw," Corporal Morrison added, his massive frame casting a shadow over the girls, "looked like 4 individuals cornering a miner in an isolated location with intent to cause harm." I watched as the dynamic that I had lived with for months completely reversed itself. Madison, who had seemed so powerful and untouchable in the school hallways, looked like exactly what she was: a spoiled teenager who had never faced real consequences for her actions. "Sir, we weren't doing anything wrong," Brittany tried, her voice shaking. "We were just talking." "Talking," Ranger Bradley repeated, pulling out a notebook. Tom Bradley had been documenting incidents in these woods for 8 years, and I knew he was meticulous about details. "And this talking required 4 of you to surround 1 person against a tree." "We didn't touch her," Chelsea said desperately. "We never laid a hand on her." "No, but you threatened her," Captain Rodriguez said, his voice never rising above conversational level, but somehow managing to fill the entire clearing with authority. "You made verbal threats against my daughter and my family. You attempted to intimidate a minor in an isolated location. And according to what I heard, you mentioned something about accidents happening to people who don't know when they're not wanted." The color drained from Madison's face as she realized that Diego had heard more of their conversation than she had thought possible. "Now," Diego continued, "I need to inform you that everything you've said and done here today has been witnessed by 4 sworn law enforcement officers. We have grounds to arrest you for harassment, intimidation, trespassing on state land, and making terroristic threats." The forest had gone completely silent, except for the sound of 4 teenage girls breathing rapidly as the reality of their situation sank in. Maya felt a mixture of relief and something else she hadn't expected: pity. For all their cruelty, they were still just kids who had gotten far over their heads.
"However," Captain Rodriguez continued, his tone shifting slightly, "I believe in giving people a chance to make things right before we involve the court system. You're all minors, and while that doesn't excuse your behavior, it does mean you have an opportunity to learn from this mistake." Madison found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What do you want us to do?" "First," Sergeant Santos said, stepping forward with her tablet, "you're going to give me your full names, your parents' contact information, and you're going to delete any photos or videos you took here today, right now, in front of us." "But we didn't," Brittany started to protest. "Ma'am?" Corporal Morrison interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I've been doing this job for 12 years. I can spot a lie from 100 yards away. You pulled out phones, you mentioned recording, and I'm willing to bet that at least one of you has been documenting your harassment of this young lady for weeks. Am I wrong?" The silence that followed was answer enough. One by one, the girls pulled out their phones with trembling hands. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya watched as her tormentors were forced to confront the digital trail of their cruelty. Madison's phone revealed a folder labeled Farm Freak Chronicles, containing dozens of photos taken without Maya's consent. Pictures of her eating lunch alone, struggling with her broken locker, walking home through the forest. The photos were accompanied by cruel captions and had been shared in group chats with other students. "This," Captain Rodriguez said, examining the evidence, "constitutes cyberbullying and harassment. In this state, that's a misdemeanor offense that can result in fines, community service, and a permanent record that follows you to college applications." "Please don't arrest us," Chelsea sobbed, mascara running down her cheeks. "My dad'll kill me. I'm supposed to go to Princeton next year." "And I'm sure Princeton would be very interested to know that their incoming student has a criminal record for bullying and harassment," Ranger Bradley noted, still taking detailed notes. "Universities take character very seriously these days." Maya felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for Chelsea. Despite everything they had put her through, she didn't want to see anyone's future destroyed. She looked up at her father, seeing both protective fury and the teaching moment warring in his expression. "Dad," she said quietly, drawing on the lessons about justice and mercy her father had taught her over the years. "They made a mistake, a big one, but everyone deserves a chance to make it right." Madison looked at Maya with something approaching shock. After months of treating her like dirt, Maya was advocating for leniency. "What I'm thinking," Maya continued, looking directly at her former tormentors, "is that actions have consequences. But so does redemption. You wanted me to understand my place? Well, my place is here, in this community, standing up for what's right. And what's right is giving you a chance to prove you're better than the worst things you've done." Sergeant Santos and Corporal Morrison exchanged glances with Captain Rodriguez. They had all seen Diego raise his daughter, watched her grow from a curious child into a young woman with an unshakable moral compass. They weren't surprised by her response, but they were impressed by her maturity. "Here's what's going to happen," Captain Rodriguez said, his tone taking on the tone he used during community education programs. "You're going to delete every single photo, video, and message related to Maya. You're going to issue public apologies, not just to Maya, but to your entire school, acknowledging your behavior and committing to do better. Additionally, you're going to complete 40 hours of community service. Specifically, you'll be working on the Rodriguez family farm, learning about the hard work and dedication it takes to provide food for your community." Maya saw Madison's eyes widen in horror at the prospect of actual manual labor, and she almost smiled. Almost. "Finally," Ranger Bradley continued, taking detailed notes, "you'll be attending a series of workshops on bullying, cyber safety, and community responsibility. These workshops will be led by local law enforcement and will be documented in your school records. And if there's even one more incident of harassment directed at Maya or anyone else," Corporal Morrison concluded, "we'll be revisiting the criminal charges. Are we clear?" The four girls nodded frantically, understanding that they had been given a gift they didn't deserve and couldn't afford to waste. "Now," Captain Rodriguez said, "I want to hear from each of you. Not an excuse, not a justification, an acknowledgement of what you did wrong and a commitment to do better." Madison went first, her voice shaky but sincere. I made Maya's life hell because I was jealous. She's smarter than me, harder working than me, and she never let anyone change who she was. Instead of admiring that, I tried to tear her down. I'm sorry, Maya. I'm really, truly sorry." Brittany followed, tears streaming down her cheeks. I went along with everything because I was scared of being left out. I know that's not an excuse. I should have stood up for you instead of standing against you." Amber was last, her voice barely audible. "I've never been the leader type, so I just followed. But following others into cruelty makes me just as responsible. I'm sorry for every mean word and every cruel action." Maya listened to each apology, seeing something she had never expected to see in these girls: genuine remorse. It didn't erase months of torment, but it was a beginning.
The walk back to the school parking lot was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. For months, she had made this journey alone, dreading each step that brought her closer to another day of harassment and humiliation. Today, she walked flanked by 4 forest rangers who had appeared like guardian angels when she needed them most, while her former tormentors trailed behind in subdued silence. Captain Rodriguez walked beside his daughter, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "You handled that with more grace than they deserved, mija," he said quietly, his voice filled with pride and concern. "But I need you to tell me how long this has been going on." Maya felt the weight of months of secret suffering pressing down on her chest. She had protected her father from the truth, not wanting to burden him with her problems when he was already dealing with the pressure from Pierce Development Group. But walking through the forest with the man who had taught her that honesty was the foundation of all trust, she couldn't maintain the pretense any longer. "Since the beginning of the school year," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe even before that, but it got really bad when Madison found out about Mr. Pierce wanting to buy our land." Diego stopped walking, his jaw tightening with controlled anger. "Maya, why didn't you tell me? This is exactly the kind of thing I needed to know about." "Because you were already stressed about the development company," Maya said, finally looking up at her father. "I heard you on the phone with your lawyer, pacing the kitchen at midnight. I saw the certified letters piling up on your desk. I didn't want to add to your problems." Sergeant Santos, who had been listening to their conversation, shook her head with a mixture of admiration and frustration. "Maya, you've been carrying this burden alone to protect your father's peace of mind. That's incredibly mature, but it's not your job to shield him from everything difficult in your life." "She's right," Diego said, stopping to face his daughter fully. "Mija, we're a team. We've always been a team. When your mother died, I promised you that we would face everything together, the good times and the bad times. You don't have to protect me from the truth, especially when the truth involves someone hurting my daughter." Maya felt tears threatening for the first time all day. Through months of harassment, public humiliation, and social isolation, she had remained strong. But her father's love and concern finally broke through the protective wall she had built around her emotions. "I just didn't want you to think I was weak. You raised me to be strong, to stand up for myself. I felt like I was failing you by letting them get to me." "Listen to me carefully," Diego said, taking her hands in his calloused ones. "Strength isn't about never needing help. Strength is about knowing when to ask for it and having the courage to be vulnerable with people who love you. What you've endured for months would have broken most adults. The fact that you survived it while maintaining your grades, your character, and your compassion shows me exactly how strong you are." Behind them, the 4 girls had stopped walking and were witnessing this tender moment between father and daughter. Maya saw Madison wipe tears from her eyes, and she wondered if Madison had ever had a conversation like this with her own father, or if Thomas Pierce was too busy conquering real estate empires to notice his daughter's emotional needs. Corporal Morrison, who had been monitoring their surroundings with the alertness of a seasoned law enforcement officer, suddenly held up his hand for silence. In the distance, they could hear the sound of multiple vehicles approaching the school parking lot. Expensive cars with powerful engines, arriving with the urgency of parents who had received alarming phone calls. "Looks like word travels fast in small towns," Ranger Bradley observed with a slight smile. "I'm betting those are 4 sets of very concerned parents." "Good," Captain Rodriguez said grimly. "It's time for the adults in this situation to take responsibility for what their children have been doing."
As they emerged from the forest, Maya saw a scene that would have been comical under different circumstances. 4 luxury vehicles were parked haphazardly in the school lot, their doors flung open, as if their drivers had abandoned them in panic. Thomas Pierce was there, of course, his expensive suit somehow looking rumpled, despite the fact that he had obviously dressed carefully that morning. Maya recognized the other parents from various school functions, all pillars of the community, all wealthy, all accustomed to solving their problems with money and influence. "There's my daughter," called Mrs. Hartwell, Brittany's mother, rushing toward the group with the kind of maternal panic that transcended social class. "Brittany, are you all right? The school called and said there was an incident." "We're fine, Mom," Brittany said quietly, but Maya noticed she couldn't meet her mother's eyes. But Thomas Pierce had a different approach. He strode toward Captain Rodriguez with the aggressive confidence of a man accustomed to intimidating his way out of problems. "Captain Rodriguez, I understand there's been some kind of misunderstanding involving our daughters. I'm sure we can resolve this quickly and quietly." "Mr. Pierce," Diego replied, his voice carrying the kind of professional courtesy that barely concealed deep dislike. "There's been no misunderstanding. Your daughter and her friends cornered my daughter in an isolated area, made threats against her and our family, and engaged in systematic harassment that has been going on for months." Pierce's face flushed red, but I could see him calculating his response. This was a man who was used to buying his way out of problems, but forest rangers couldn't be purchased like local politicians or building inspectors. "Now, I'm sure Maya may have misinterpreted," Pierce began. "Mr. Pierce," Sergeant Santos interrupted, stepping forward with her tablet. "We have documentation, photos, videos, messages, all of it stored on your daughter's phone until about 20 minutes ago when she was forced to delete it in front of 4 law enforcement officers." The parking lot fell silent as the weight of Sergeant Santos's words sank in. Thomas Pierce's confident demeanor cracked visibly as he realized that his usual tactics of denial and intimidation wouldn't work against trained law enforcement officers with documented evidence. "Furthermore," Corporal Morrison added, his voice carrying the authority of years in uniform, "the harassment wasn't just random teenage drama. It was specifically designed to pressure the Rodriguez family into selling their property to Pierce Development Group. That potentially elevates this from simple bullying to extortion and intimidation in service of a business interest." Maya watched Pierce's face cycle through several emotions: anger, calculation, and what might have been the first genuine fear she had ever seen him display. Around him, the other parents were beginning to understand that their children hadn't just been caught in typical teenage misbehavior, but in something that could have serious legal ramifications. "Madison," Pierce said sharply, turning to his daughter, "get in the car, we're leaving." "Actually, Mr. Pierce," Captain Rodriguez said calmly, "Madison and the other girls have community service commitments and mandatory workshops to attend. They'll be staying to fulfill those obligations." "I don't think so," Pierce replied, his voice taking on the threatening tone Maya had heard him use during phone calls with her father. "My lawyers will have something to say about forced labor and—" "Your lawyers are welcome to review the agreement your daughter signed 20 minutes ago," Ranger Bradley said, producing a tablet with the digital signatures. "She's a minor, but she's also 17 years old, which means she can enter into community service agreements to resolve misdemeanor offenses. Unless, of course, you'd prefer we pursue the criminal charges instead." Mrs. Hartwell stepped forward, her maternal instincts overriding any social considerations. "Excuse me, but what exactly happened here? The school was very vague when they called." Maya looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. This was her story to tell. "For months, your daughters have been making my life hell," Maya said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "They called me names, spread rumors about me, took pictures of me without permission, and shared them with cruel captions. They targeted me because Madison's father wants to buy our farm, and she thought if they made our lives miserable enough, we'd sell and leave town. Today, they cornered me in the forest, threatened me, and basically told me I needed to convince my dad to sell, or accidents might happen to people who don't know when they're not wanted. Mrs. Hartwell's hand flew to her mouth in horror. "Brittany, is this true?" Brittany nodded miserably, unable to speak. Chelsea's mother, Dr. Amanda Foster, looked stricken. As a pediatrician, she had dedicated her life to caring for children, and the idea that her own daughter had been systematically tormenting another child was clearly devastating to her. "Chelsea," she said quietly, "how could you do this? How could you be so cruel to another person?" "I don't know," Chelsea sobbed. "I just went along with it. I didn't want to be the next target." Mrs. Patterson, Amber's mother, was crying openly now. "My daughter was raised better than this. We taught her to stand up for people who were being hurt, not to join in hurting them." Maya felt an unexpected wave of sympathy for these parents. They were discovering that their children were capable of cruelty they had never imagined, and they were having to confront their own failures in raising compassionate human beings. Only Thomas Pierce remained defiant. "This is ridiculous. Kids tease each other. It's part of growing up. You can't criminalize normal teenage behavior." "Mr. Pierce," Diego said, his voice dangerously quiet, "threatening a minor in an isolated location isn't normal teenage behavior. Using harassment and intimidation to further business interest definitely isn't normal teenage behavior. And if you think what your daughter did was acceptable, then I understand exactly where she learned her values." The other parents looked uncomfortable at Pierce's attitude, clearly not wanting to be associated with his attitude. "Here's what's going to happen," Captain Rodriguez continued. "The girls are going to complete their community service, attend their workshops, and make their public apologies. Any parent who objects to this arrangement can discuss it with the county prosecutor because those are the only two options on the table. Additionally," Sergeant Santos added, "we'll be filing a report with the school district about the systematic harassment that has been taking place on school property. The administration will need to address their policies on cyberbullying and off-campus harassment." Maya realized that this moment represented a turning point, not just for her, but for her entire community. The incident had exposed the ugly underbelly of social hierarchies and economic pressure that had been operating in shadows. Now, forced into the light, everyone would have to decide what kind of community they wanted to be. "Maya," Dr. Foster said, approaching her directly, "I want to apologize to you personally, not just for Chelsea's behavior, but for my failure as her mother to teach her better. You shouldn't have had to endure months of torment because of our children's cruelty." Maya looked into Dr. Foster's eyes and saw genuine remorse, not the calculated damage control that Thomas Pierce was attempting, but real pain at discovering her daughter's capacity for cruelty. "Thank you," Maya said simply. "That means more than you know." Mrs. Hartwell stepped forward next, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her manicured hands. "Maya, I'm horrified by what Brittany did. We've raised her in privilege, and I'm afraid we may have accidentally taught her that privilege meant she was better than others. That stops today." Mrs. Patterson nodded through her tears. "Amber will be making this right, I promise you, and she'll be volunteering at the food bank every weekend for the rest of the school year. She needs to understand what real hardship looks like, what it means when people genuinely struggle." Maya felt something shifting in the air around them, a recognition that this incident had revealed problems much deeper than teenage bullying. These were symptoms of a community that had allowed economic inequality and social stratification to poison relationships between families who should have been supporting each other. Thomas Pierce, however, remained unmoved by the emotional reconciliation happening around him.
"This is all very touching," he said sarcastically, "but I have businesses to run and deals to close. Madison, we're leaving, now." "Actually, Dad," Madison said quietly, speaking for the first time since the parents had arrived, "I think I need to stay and face what I did." Pierce whirled on his daughter, his face flushing red with anger. "Madison Pierce, you get in that car this instant. I'm not going to let some backwoods ranger and his farm girl daughter destroy our family's reputation." The casual cruelty of Pierce's words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Maya saw her father's hands clench into fists, saw the other parents take unconscious steps away from Pierce, saw Madison's face crumple with shame and embarrassment. "Mr. Pierce," Captain Rodriguez said, his voice carrying deadly calm, "you just called my daughter names in front of multiple witnesses, including law enforcement officers. That's harassment, and it demonstrates exactly where your daughter learned her behavior." "Are you threatening me?" Pierce demanded, puffing up his chest like an angry rooster. "I'm informing you," Diego replied evenly. "Your pattern of intimidation and harassment ends today. The pressure tactics against my family, the attempts to drive us out of town through your daughter's cruelty, the late-night phone calls, the frivolous lawsuits, all of it stops now." Sergeant Santos stepped forward with her tablet in hand. "Mr. Pierce, I'm documenting this entire conversation. Your statement about backwoods rangers and farm girls in the context of an ongoing harassment investigation will be included in our report. I suggest you choose your next words very carefully." Maya watched Pierce realize that he had overplayed his hand. In trying to intimidate her father the way he had successfully intimidated others, he had revealed his true character in front of people who couldn't be bought, threatened, or silenced. "Madison," Dr. Foster said gently, "you don't have to go with your father if you don't feel safe. My husband and I would be happy to drive you home when you're ready." Madison looked at her father with something approaching fear. "Dad, please, I need to do the right thing for once. I need to make this right." "Fine," Pierce snarled. "Embarrass our family, ruin your future, see if I care." He stalked toward his luxury sedan, then turned back one final time. "But don't think this is over, Rodriguez. I have lawyers, I have money, and I have influence in this town. Your little farm is still going to be a shopping center." "Mr. Pierce," Maya said, stepping forward before her father could respond. Everyone turned to look at her. This 17-year-old girl who had been at the center of months of harassment and was now facing down one of the most powerful men in the county. "With all due respect," she continued, her voice steady and clear, "this isn't about money or influence or legal tricks. This is about what kind of community we want to be. And I think what happened here today shows that most people, including your daughter, want to be better than the worst version of themselves." Pierce stared at her for a long moment, clearly unused to being challenged by anyone, let alone a teenager. "You think you're very wise for your age, don't you?" "I think I'm someone who's learned that trying to tear other people down doesn't actually make you stronger. It just makes you smaller. And I think your daughter is starting to learn that too." The parking lot fell silent except for the sound of Pierce's expensive car starting up. He drove away with the aggressive acceleration of someone who had lost control of a situation and didn't know how else to express his frustration. "Madison," Maya said quietly after her father had disappeared, "I'm sorry about what he said, about what he called you. You're the opposite of everything he said. I know, and so do you, which is why you're going to be okay." Mrs. Hartwell looked at Captain Rodriguez with newfound respect. "You've raised an extraordinary young woman, Captain.
I hope Brittany can learn from Maya's example. She can, Diego said, his arm around his daughter's shoulders. All of them can. People aren't defined by their worst moments. They're defined by what they do after those moments to make things right. Corporal Morrison checked his watch. Ladies, your community service starts Saturday morning at 8 a.m. at the Rodriguez farm. Dress for outdoor work, bring water bottles, and be prepared to learn what real hardship looks like. What are we going to be doing? Amber asked nervously. Maya smiled for the first time all day. Everything. Mucking stalls, mending fences, weeding gardens, feeding animals. You wanted to know what farm life was really like? You are about to find out.
That Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of golden autumn light that made the Rodriguez farm look like something from a painting. Maya was up before sunrise, as always, completing her regular chores before her unwilling volunteers arrived. She had spent the past few days thinking about how to handle this unusual situation, part community service, part education, part opportunity for redemption. At exactly 8 a.m., 3 cars pulled into the farm's gravel driveway. Dr. Foster dropped off Chelsea with an encouraging hug and a reminder to learn something meaningful. Mrs. Hartwell brought Brittany along with a thermos of coffee and what looked like a care package of snacks. Mrs. Patterson arrived with Amber and stayed long enough to speak privately with Captain Rodriguez about her daughter's attitude adjustment. Madison was notably absent. "Where's the 4th member of your group?" Diego asked, consulting his clipboard with the kind of military precision that made his ranger team so effective. "Her dad wouldn't let her come," Chelsea admitted quietly. "He said community service was beneath the Pierce family name and that he'd rather pay the fine." Maya felt a surge of disappointment. She had been hoping that Madison, as the ringleader, would benefit most from understanding the reality of farm life. But she also understood that Pierce's controlling nature meant Madison had little freedom to make her own choices. "Well," Diego said, "that's Madison's loss and his mistake. The 3 of you are here, and that's what matters. Maya will be your supervisor for the day, and I'll be checking on your progress periodically." Maya looked at her 3 former tormentors, who were dressed in what they apparently thought constituted farm wear. Brittany in designer jeans that probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe, Chelsea in pristine white sneakers that would be ruined within an hour, and Amber in an outfit that looked better suited for a country club than a working farm. "Okay," Maya said, trying to strike the right balance between authority and kindness. "Let's start with the basics. This is a working farm, which means every single thing we do here serves a purpose. Nothing is for show, nothing is decorative, and everything requires real work." She led them to the chicken coop first, where 24 hens were waiting for their morning feeding. "Chickens are simple but important," Maya explained, demonstrating how to scatter the feed evenly. "They give us eggs, they eat insects that would otherwise damage our crops, and they provide natural fertilizer. But they need consistent care, 7 days a week, regardless of weather or how we're feeling." Brittany tentatively scattered some feed, jumping back when a particularly bold hen approached her feet. "Do they bite?" "No, but they can be pushy about food," Maya said, unable to suppress a small smile. "They're actually pretty friendly once you get used to them." The morning progressed with a series of small revelations. Chelsea discovered that she actually enjoyed the rhythmic work of weeding the vegetable garden, finding it meditative in a way her overscheduled life had never allowed. Amber showed unexpected gentleness while helping Maya tend to a calf that was recovering from a minor injury. But it was Brittany who had the most profound reaction. When they moved on to mucking out the horse stalls, arguably the least glamorous job on any farm, she initially recoiled from the smell and the mess. "This is disgusting," she complained, holding the pitchfork like it might bite her. "It's honest work," Maya replied, demonstrating the proper technique.
These horses depend on us to keep their living space clean and healthy. When you really care about something, no job is too dirty or too hard. Something in Maya's tone made Brittany stop complaining and really look at what they were doing. She watched Maya work with practiced efficiency, saw the way the horses nuzzled her affectionately, observed the quiet satisfaction in Maya's face as she created a clean, comfortable environment for the animals. "You actually love this," Brittany said suddenly. "This isn't punishment for you. This is your life, and you love it." "I do. My father always says that work is only drudgery if you don't understand its purpose. Everything we do here matters. We're feeding people, caring for animals, protecting the environment. It's connected to something bigger than ourselves." By midday, all three girls were dirty, tired, and beginning to understand why Maya took such pride in her family's way of life. They sat in the shade of an old oak tree, sharing the lunch Maya's father had prepared. Simple sandwiches made from homegrown veggies and fresh bread. "Maya, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you help us? Back in the parking lot when the Rangers wanted to press charges, you spoke up for us. After everything he did to you, why would you do that?" Maya was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something she had learned from years of watching her father work with both animals and people. "Because hurt people, she said finally, "and healed people heal people. I figured if I could help you understand why you were hurting me, maybe you could stop hurting yourselves too." "What do you mean, hurting ourselves?" Amber asked. "Look at what you were all willing to do just to avoid being left out of Madison's group. You compromised your own values, did things you knew were wrong, and became people you didn't actually want to be. That's a kind of self-harm, even if you didn't realize it." The afternoon brought more challenging work, repairing a section of fence that required physical strength and problem-solving skills. Maya was impressed by how quickly the three girls adapted, working together and actually helping each other instead of competing for status. "You know what's weird?" Brittany said as they stretched wire along fence posts. "This morning has felt more accomplished than any party or shopping trip I've ever been on." "That's because this work actually matters. You're contributing something real to the world." As the weeks of community service continued, Maya watched her former bullies transform in ways none of them had expected. Chelsea discovered a passion for sustainable agriculture and started researching organic farming techniques online. Brittany began volunteering at the local animal shelter, finding that her natural empathy flourished when given a positive outlet. Amber, the quietest of the group, surprised everyone by excelling at the detailed record-keeping that modern farming required. But the most significant change came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks into their community service, a familiar luxury sedan pulled into the farm's driveway. Maya looked up from the greenhouse, where she was teaching Chelsea about seedling propagation, to see Madison Pierce climbing out of her father's car. She looked nervous but determined, carrying a pair of work boots and dressed in practical clothes that Maya had never seen her wear before. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," Madison said as Maya approached, "but I convinced my dad to let me drive myself today. I told him I was going to study group." "Madison," she said carefully, "if your father finds out you're here, he won't unless someone tells him. And even if he does, I don't care anymore." Madison's voice carried a new strength that Maya had never heard before. "I've been watching you guys work together for weeks, seeing the pictures Chelsea posts on social media, hearing Brittany talk about how much she's learning. I can't stand being left out anymore." Maya studied Madison's face, looking for signs of the manipulation and calculating behavior she had come to expect. Instead, she saw something that looked like genuine humility. Why now? What changed? Madison's composure cracked slightly. "Because I've spent 3 weeks sitting in my perfect house, wearing my perfect clothes, doing nothing meaningful, while you three were out here actually making a difference. And I realized that for all my father's money and influence, you have something I've never had." "What's that?" "Purpose. Community. People who actually care about you for who you are, not what you can do for them." Madison wiped her eyes with the back of her hand.
I don't even know who I really am underneath all the expectations and image management, but I want to find out. Maya felt the last of her anger toward Madison dissolving. She had seen this moment coming, had hoped for it actually, but hadn't been sure Madison would have the courage to break away from her father's control. You realize this isn't easy work, Maya said, and it's not glamorous. Your manicure won't survive the first hour. Madison held up her hands, showing nails that had already been cut short and filed down. I came prepared. The integration of Madison into their work group created an interesting dynamic. Chelsea, Brittany, and Amber had already formed a bond through their shared experience of genuine physical labor and moral reckoning. Madison had to prove herself all over again, not to Maya, who was prepared to give her the same chance she had given the others, but to the friends she had once led astray. I don't understand, Brittany said during their lunch break that first day. 3 weeks ago, you were telling us that Maya belonged in a barn, and now you want to work in one? Madison was quiet for a long moment, carefully choosing her words. 3 weeks ago, I thought being cruel made me powerful. I thought putting other people down somehow lifted me up. But watching my dad try to intimidate Captain Rodriguez in that parking lot, seeing how ugly and small he looked when he couldn't bully his way out of a situation, I realized I was becoming just like him. And you don't want to be like him? Amber asked. I want to be like Maya, she said simply. I want to be someone who makes things better instead of tearing them down. Maya felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the autumn sunshine. This was what her father had meant when he talked about justice and mercy working together, the possibility that even the people who hurt us could choose to become better versions of themselves. The transformation wasn't immediate or perfect. Madison struggled with the physical demands of farm work, complained about the early hours, and occasionally slipped back into entitled behavior when she was tired or frustrated. But she kept showing up, kept working, kept trying to understand the world from Maya's perspective. One afternoon, while they were harvesting late-season vegetables for the local food bank, Madison asked the question Maya had been expecting for weeks. "How do you forgive someone like me?" she said quietly, not looking up from the squash she was carefully placing in a crate. "I was horrible to you for months. I made your life miserable on purpose. How do you just let it go?" Maya straightened up, stretching her back and considering the question seriously. "I don't think forgiveness is about letting it go," she said finally. "I think it's about choosing to believe that people can change, and you're proving every day that they can." "But aren't you angry? Don't you want me to suffer the way you suffered?" "I was angry," Maya admitted, "for a long time. But staying angry was like drinking poison and expecting you to get sick. It was hurting me more than it was hurting you." Madison was crying now, tears falling onto the vegetables they were harvesting for families who needed food assistance. "I don't know how to make up for what I did." "You're doing it," Maya said gently. "Every day that you choose to be better than you were yesterday, you're making up for it. Every person you help instead of hurt, every time you stand up for someone instead of tearing them down, that's how you make amends." Around them, the farm hummed with the quiet satisfaction of meaningful work being done well, and Maya felt something she had never expected to feel toward Madison Pierce: hope. The transformation reached its culmination 6 weeks later during the school's annual Harvest Festival. What had traditionally been a celebration dominated by the wealthy families of Millbrook took on a different character when Maya and her former bullies decided to participate together. Their booth featured produce from the Rodriguez farm, handmade crafts that Chelsea had learned to create during her community service, and informational displays about sustainable farming that Amber had researched and designed. But the centerpiece was something none of them had planned: a collaborative photo essay documenting their journey from conflict to cooperation. "I still can't believe you convinced the principal to let us present this," Brittany said nervously as families began arriving at the festival. "Mrs. Henderson thought it was exactly the kind of restorative justice program the school should be promoting," Maya replied, adjusting the display board that showed before and after photos of their group. "Plus, she was impressed by how much community service you all completed."
Madison was arranging vegetables at their booth with the same attention to detail she had once applied to her appearance. "My father is going to hate this," she said, but there was no fear in her voice anymore, just a quiet determination to do the right thing regardless of the consequences. "Are you sure you want to go through with the presentation?" Maya asked. "Once you get up on that stage and tell everyone what really happened, there's no taking it back." "That's exactly why I need to do it," she replied. "For months, people thought you were the problem, that you were somehow bringing bullying on yourself. They need to know the truth." As the afternoon progressed, their booth drew more attention than Maya had expected. Teachers stopped by to congratulate the girls on their collaborative project. Parents asked thoughtful questions about sustainable farming that Amber had researched and designed. Even students who had previously avoided Maya began engaging with her as an equal. But the real test came when Thomas Pierce arrived at the festival with several business associates in tow. Maya watched him survey the booths with the calculating eye of someone always looking for opportunity, and she saw the exact moment he spotted his daughter working alongside the farm girl he had tried so hard to drive out of town. His face cycled through several emotions: shock, anger, embarrassment, before settling on the kind of cold fury Maya recognized from their previous encounters. He began walking toward their booth with purposeful strides, his associates trailing behind like confused satellites. "Madison Pierce," he called out when he was still 20 feet away, his voice carrying clearly across the festival grounds. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Madison looked up from the customer she was helping, her face calm despite the tension Maya could see in her shoulders. "I'm volunteering at the Harvest Festival, Dad, just like you always told me community involvement was important for college applications." "Not with them," he hissed, glancing dismissively at Maya and the others. "We discussed this. The Pierce family doesn't associate with people beneath our social standing." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke, and Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that accompanied Pierce's presence. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had allies. "Mr. Pierce," Chelsea said firmly, stepping up beside Madison. "Maya and her family have been nothing but kind to us. They've taught us more about real values in 6 weeks than we learned in years of private school. And Maya isn't beneath anyone's social standing," Brittany added, her voice growing stronger with each word. "She's one of the most intelligent, hardworking, compassionate people I've ever met." Pierce's face flushed red as he realized that his daughter's friends were openly defying him. "Madison, get in the car. Now. We're leaving." "No, Dad," Madison said quietly. "I'm not leaving." The festival crowd had begun to notice the confrontation, and Maya could see people stopping to listen. Mrs. Henderson, the principal, was making her way over with a concerned expression. Several teachers had paused their conversations to watch the unfolding drama. "Madison Pierce, you will get in that car this instant, or you'll find yourself cut off from everything. Your allowance, your car, your college fund, everything." Madison took a deep breath, and Maya saw her draw strength from the supportive presence of her friends. "Then I guess I'll have to learn to live without those things. Maya's family doesn't have money, but they have something more important. They have love and respect and genuine care for each other. I'd rather be poor with people who actually care about me than rich with someone who only values me as an extension of his reputation." The crowd had grown silent, understanding that they were witnessing more than just a family argument. They were seeing a young woman stand up for her principles against powerful pressure to conform. Pierce looked around at the watching faces, clearly calculating how this public confrontation would affect his business reputation.
This is ridiculous, he said finally. You're throwing away your future for what? Some misguided notion of friendship with people who will never be able to help you succeed in life? I'm choosing my future, and I'm choosing friends who helped me become a better person instead of people who only care about what I can do for them. Mrs. Henderson arrived at that moment, her principal's instincts kicking in as she assessed the situation. Is there a problem here? Mr. Pierce was just leaving, Maya said calmly, stepping forward to stand beside Madison. And Madison is staying to help with our presentation this afternoon. Pierce stared at the united front of young women for a long moment, clearly recognizing that he had lost control of the situation entirely. Fine, he said finally, but don't come running to me when you realize your mistake. He stalked away with his business associates, leaving behind a crowd of people who had witnessed his true character in full display. You okay? Maya asked Madison, who was shaking slightly from the adrenaline and emotion of standing up to her father. I'm better than okay, she replied, looking around at the friends who had supported her when it mattered most. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I belong. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.